And with me here in Washington, Chuck Rosenberg, former U.S. attorney and senior FBI official. He's also an MSNBC contributor. Chuck, we've been watching Nathan Wade, who Fani Willis hired to basically be the managing partner, if you will, of the prosecution. And his assertion and hers that their relationship, their romantic relationship that they had previously denied, started after he had begun working for her. There's conflicting testimony here, though, from a former associate.
Yes, that's exactly right, Andrea. There is conflicting testimony. A woman named Robin Yurti testified earlier this morning that she had been close friends with Fani Willis and that she knew, observed that Ms. Willis and Mr. Wade had a romantic relationship. And she described seeing, sort of the things that you might see when two people are dating, affection. Contrast that with what Mr. Wade just said on the stand, which was that they did have a romantic relationship, but it did not start as early as Ms. Yurti said it started. It started, to your point, after he was hired by the district attorney on a contractual basis to work on this case. So what does that mean? You have two different stories, X and not X. And now the finder of fact, the judge in this case, is going to have to make a determination based on testimony, on credibility, on his assessment of the witnesses, and perhaps on other witnesses yet to come.
And so far, he's been questioned by Michael Roman, a co-defendant of Donald Trump's attorney. Now, if the judge does decide that they're in this conflict, that Nathan Wade and potentially Fani Willis, in her assertions, she may well take the stand as well, but in her assertions, the affidavit to the court, that if they misrepresented, basically lied to the court, do you think that, well, that would disqualify them, but do you think that there is becoming, as we watch this testimony, and we're going to see more lawyers for these co-defendants, including Donald Trump, potentially questioning him and then a cross-examination. But if it's determined that they have apparently misled, even before the judge rules in this case, do you think we should reach a point where, for the interest of protecting the trial, the entire Fulton County trial, that they should voluntarily step aside?
It's a great question. So this is not going well for the state. It could turn out okay, and it might turn out worse. But I think a district attorney, a U.S. attorney, a prosecuting official has a special obligation to the case. In fact, I had grabbed some language from a 1935 Supreme Court case. I used to keep this excerpt from Berger v. U.S. on my desk when I was a prosecutor and when I was the United States attorney. I'm not going to read all of it, I promise, but I just wanted to read a sentence. The prosecutor is the representative not of an ordinary party to a controversy, but of a sovereignty whose obligation is to govern impartially, and that obligation is as compelling as its obligation to govern at all, and whose interest, therefore, is not that it shall win a case, but that justice shall be done. Prosecutors have a higher obligation. It's not personal. It's not egotistical. It's not about you. It's about the office and the pursuit of justice. To your point, it might be appropriate for Ms. Willis to consider removing herself from this case now and turning the reins over to a senior official in the district attorney's office and let him or her handle it. Because this is getting ugly and it's getting messy, and my guess is it's not going to get better.
And Chuck will follow up on that. But right now, joining us in New York is, of course, my colleagues, Jose Diaz-Balart and Ana Cabrera.
Indeed. Joining us here on the set in New York, Charles Coleman, a former prosecutor in Brooklyn, New York, and an MSNBC legal analyst, Andrew Weissman, former FBI general counsel and a former senior member of the Mueller report. He is also an MSNBC legal analyst, and Caroline Polisi, a federal and criminal white-collar defense attorney.
Charles, what are your takeaways from what we've been hearing all morning? I think the conversation prior to today had been all about the relationship and the importance of talking about whether that was appropriate. But today we see this explosive shift and a necessary one to examine the timeline. And were Fani Willis and Mr. Wade accurate and truthful in their filings when they talked about their romantic relationship beginning after Mr. Wade had begun working as a special prosecutor with the Fulton County D.A.'s office? The significance of all of this is that it speaks at the very heart of Ms. Willis's integrity and her credibility and her judgment making as a prosecutor. And that's what you're going to see the defense hammer home in terms of trying to argue for her to be disqualified. Because if you cannot trust her to tell the truth about this relationship, the relationship itself is not necessarily the biggest problem she has at this point. The fact that she, after the relationship was exposed, has not apparently been truthful, or there's a question about the veracity of what she's filed as the DA in this case, then what can you trust as it relates to everything else that Donald Trump and his other 18 co-conspirators are charged with?
Caroline, if we had been sitting here as we have before 9 a.m. Eastern time, and now that we're coming up to 12:23, we have learned so much. What did you take away from these hours?
Yeah, this has been a bombshell, and it was a sort of a slow burn. But if you parse the language, huge issues here. And I want to be really clear: this is not about a relationship between two consenting adults. This has nothing to do with that. It's about lying to the court. It's about potential financial gain on the part of Fani Willis, and not even so much. That's a second. That takes the back seat here. The issue is that her credibility is shot. Just as Anthony was saying, if she lied to the court, she submitted something to the court that she knew was false and inaccurate, what else was she lying about? It's a horrible, horrible look for her. I think this case is dead in the water. She will be disqualified. The case will then have to go back to be reassigned to another prosecutor's office. Likely it will languish there for months. I think it's over. I think the case is over.
But hold on, because why do we think that she was lying at this point, right? The judge has to make that determination. We heard Nathan Wade double down on what he had written in the affidavit and saying that, no, our relationship, our romantic relationship didn't start until after I became the special prosecutor on this case, not before. So you're pretty certain, though, that he's been established as untruthful?
I think everything is pointing in that direction. He submitted an affidavit, he wrote the affidavit, and Fani Willis's office submitted that affidavit, so she's just as complicit as he.
Andrew, if you would, take us on a broader picture of what it is that we've been seeing, but also what are the issues that they're discussing and why are they relevant to the larger Georgia case against Trump and the other defendants, co-defendants?
So going into this hearing, that was the argument that Fani Willis's team was making, which is this is sort of apples and oranges. Even if there is an issue, it's sort of irrelevant to the criminal case. So here, the real concern for the judge who said, I'm going to have this hearing, was financial. It was, I want to know, was Fani Willis really paying sort of half her share, or was she essentially profiting from her relationship with somebody on the team who has this contract, Mr. Wade? So it was very sort of cabined to that sort of financial component. One part of that financial component is, well, when did they start having this relationship? Because that helps decide when did money start getting paid. So they talked about taking trips and that they roughly were splitting costs. All of that was by the wayside. In other words, that was sort of going in. That was supposed to be what the main issue is. And I think the main issue now is, did somebody lie? I agree that at this point, just looking at the demeanor, the judge would have a basis to say, I believe the witness who said the relationship started at a time that Fani Willis is on record saying it didn't, and Mr. Wade is saying it didn't. So there's a discrepancy, as Chuck said. We have to see, this is just the start of the hearing. There are other witnesses, there'll be other proof, but I agree at this point, just looking at their credibility, but it's not our judgment, it'll be the judge's judgment. if they find that Mr. Wade lied and thus Fani Willis submitted a knowingly false affidavit, I agree, it's over.
Do you expect that, or Charles, ask you, that they will call, in fact, Fani Willis to take the stand?
I think we can see that. I think that we should anticipate that that's going to happen. At this point, it's questionable as to what value that would have in terms of, do you need it? If you're someone who is arguing for the disqualification at this point, I think that you feel pretty good about where you are. I don't necessarily know that Mr. Wade did a bad job in terms of his testimony, but I also don't know that as someone who is clearly interested in this from two angles, both personally with respect to his divorce and the impact that it could have there, and professionally, obviously, as the special prosecutor on this case, those are things that I think put him in a position where his credibility is going to be significantly questioned and challenged, even as he wasn't a terrible witness. I want to point out the lawyering that we saw today. Like, for a lot of people who may have watched this, they may have thought, man, this was brutal. Yes, the actual subject of the testimony and the substance of it was not the cleanest thing to walk through. But the lawyer that we saw and the lawyering that we saw was not really top notch. It took them very long to get to where it is that they needed to go. But eventually, it seems like they may have gotten there.
Andrea.